Yep. So when we talk about retraction, so really what we're aiming for is like a proper setup. So the interesting part about a retraction is it's something that it's almost it should be out of consciousness of it actually happening. So when we're talking about that is we have in our back our traps. So our traps basically pull our shoulder blades together and then down and back. But what it also can do is pull your shoulder blades forward. So that's where you'll see people in a hunch position sometimes. And especially when we talk about a postural adjustment, is you see people slouched over like this. And so when I talk about pulling our traps back together, what we're trying to do is we're trying to stabilize our shoulder blades by pulling them back and then down, and it almost props yourself up. So half of it, and then Becky kind of went into this really well last time, is so before I even go into my movement, especially when you think about push-ups, when you think about some variation of the chin-up you're doing right now, it's how can I set up initially. So actually, it's almost a great warm-up tool in itself is taking your shoulders from almost this protracted state where I'm rounding through my back and then pulling my shoulder blades back and together. And so that in itself is just an adjustment as to how can I just set up for a movement properly. It's, well, how able am I to actually pull my shoulder blades together and then down and raise my chest up. So it's kind of walking through this whole activation period of how engaged am I with the central elements of my back.
Mm-hmm. And Nick, if you can explain to the importance of doing that even on lower body exercises. So I think sometimes we think like, well, if we're just doing lower body, I don't need to worry about my stability or my posture, things like that. Can you explain doing that?
For sure. I mean, and that's where it's this whole like kinetic change of even when I'm doing lower body, it's like immediately, and especially this is even to go into the upper body, but sometimes you might find as you're doing this, as I was training my mom the other day, as soon as we did any type of upper body movement, she struggles with this retraction just because she's never worked on it before. And so her immediate response is actually to throw an arch in her lower back. And so if you think about it, even from a leg perspective, some people will hyper arch their back. So I'm actually going to just set this up just so when they go in to do a movement, instead of actually keeping their chest up and staying proud in their stance and trying to actually keep this activated, they'll just hard wire their back and they'll hyper arch, and therefore it tries to stabilize by staying upright, but it winds up just falling into out of the movement pattern, and now the body's trying to find all these hyper or other ways to get to the objective of if I'm just thinking about pulling an object closer to me, all I have to do is arch back and immediately that object's closer. But what we're trying to do is actually find some stability in our shoulder blades and help through there. So that's the more upper body version of it. But when we talk about lower body, it's more so how can I stay out of, just my back rounding down and staying off those movement patterns. We're trying to stay tall. We're trying to stay in good posture as we go through these movements.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thanks for going through that. Becky or Mike, would you be able to demonstrate the box squat? I think that's been a really helpful one for a lot of people as well. If you'd be willing to show that one, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can do it here. Let's see. So yeah, with the box squat or chair squat, just grab something that's just a couple feet tall. I'm just using a chair, my patio chair. So what you're gonna do, you're gonna start with the retraction like Nick was saying. Have your body in a nice athletic stance here, 2 feet apart, a little wider than shoulder width apart. And you're gonna start with retraction. I like to have my hands in front of me just to stabilize myself and slowly start bending your knees all the way down until you can feel that chair or box, and then slowly come back up. Nice and slow as you can. Find that chair and slowly come back up here.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, another important part of really just another general concept for all of the exercises that we want to highlight is if you cannot basically complete a full range of motion, that's something you want to pay attention to. So this is something we can discuss a little bit more as a team here as well, or Becky, if you'd like to have a few thoughts on this. But basically, the question is, what do I do if I find it really hard to maintain good form in like the lower turnaround of a push-up or in that deep squat position? How should people modify that movement to make it still effective and where they can complete roughly that 70 to 90 seconds for the exercise? What suggestions would you have, or Becky, if you have any initial thoughts on that? I can add in a few as well, but that's been a question I've gotten a few times is, well, I can only do like one of those repetitions, how do we modify that in that sense?
That's a great question. So we want to get back to the fact that we want this exercise to be safe, effective, and efficient. And we want to focus on safety, of course. We don't want you to get injured as you're getting stronger. So if you find an exercise, let's use, for instance, a push-up where you can't do a full push-up. Your feet are extended back, you're balancing on your toes like Nick demonstrated in that workout. That's where regressions are necessary. And Nick, I appreciate the fact that you said last week that you even do regressions sometimes when you find that an exercise is too difficult. So for instance, in the push-up, start by going to your knees and making sure that you've got great body position, everything's shoulders are back and down, and elbows are coming back. When you're lowering, your elbows are going back to your rib cage. And see if that is possible. Even if you can't do that, then take another step, take another regression, and even just hold it halfway. If you can't bring it all the way down to the floor, can't bring your chest all the way down to the floor, come up and just hold it halfway and just try to focus on really good form and just holding it as deeply as you can. And so start with that. And with regressions, don't get discouraged with regressions. Remember, regressions are a building block. They're building blocks on how to reach that great push-up that you're striving for. But how often have we ever tried something, for instance, a chin-up, especially for women? I don't think I've done a chin-up, a really perfect chin-up, since I was like 10 years old on the monkey bars at the elementary school, okay? Because our form changes. Like I said last week, our hips are larger and we tend to have a less upper body strength. And so, but how often have we said, let's take a chin up and break it down into the components that make it a successful chin up? What are we actually engaging? And so we're teaching ourselves to engage those pieces as stepping stones to do that perfect exercise. So don't feel bad about doing regressions. They're all a part of being successful.
I think if we take, make sure so if we take it back even to Kevin's initial statement of, why are we performing these movements in the first part? The reason I use regressions is more so, especially when you implement a slow and controlled movement pattern and you know what muscle you're trying to engage. And that's half the reason why in those charts and in those clips, we utilize like what muscles are we trying to engage through this? It's why I use regressions all the time, because I'm trying to find what muscle I'm working and put it to the best challenge I can right away. And so if you can execute that in 30 seconds, you almost have to dive down into another regression a few minutes later, just because now you're going through the excursion and your body just hates the movement pattern in itself. It's just telling you to get out of this movement pattern, but you're trying to stay focused on what is the objective. And the objective isn't just to get out the rep, it's to activate that muscle group. It's to bring it through its full range of motion. And the second it tries to scurry its way out, arch your back, throw your hips down, that's why I say, like, I'm not afraid to go to an incline push-up, just because I know, especially when I'm trying to engage my chest, just given my posture, it's the best way to stimulate it and stay controlled for the longest period of time. And then as I slowly build and build and build, I'll go back down to the floor, but I'll always at some point in my programming go back to some forms of regressions and see if my execution's even better than it was at before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. And also, just to reiterate what Becky was saying about safety is, for whatever exercise you're doing, whether you're doing the regression of it or the full movement, we always want you to perform those movements within the basically the greatest range of motion, but the greatest range of pain-free motion. So there's some people that we work with, quite a number, who have a shoulder issue or a knee issue, and it really doesn't matter, even if we have no resistance that they're working at, just a simple like movement of the arm. Like there's just certain positions that you just literally cannot do, no matter if there's resistance applied or not. And so if that's you, definitely work within the constraints of safety for your individual needs on that. So even if with a regression incline push-up on the table or on the stairs, if you can only go down to where your elbows are 90 degrees, that's fine. Or if you can't go that far, that's fine. Like just work within the comfortable range of motion that you have. And again, realize or noting the difference between the sensation of pain and the sensation of discomfort. That's an important distinction to make. Pain generally, if you have an injury, is like a sharp stabbing pain. If it's discomfort due to muscle fatigue, that's more of that dull burn sensation where your body's just like, what are we doing? Let's get out of here. So really note the difference. And if it's latter, then that's where over time, actually, one of the most fun things for me to see is how our clients become mentally stronger over time, because they continue to push themselves in times of discomfort, and seeing essentially how long you can put up with that high level of discomfort. So, but if it is pain, if it is sharp stabbing pain, obviously then do not push those boundaries, because we don't want you to further aggravate an injury that may be there. So just want to make mention of that. Yeah, again, utilize the chat function, the questions, or also, send us emails during the week of questions you have, and we'll bring them up. We'll address them in these weekly webinars. And so it's a great way to even get input from the whole team and not just hearing me respond all the time. So, yeah, do you guys, coaches, do you have other questions or common things that you've been hearing or seeing, or anything you want to address? Otherwise, we can move on to some of the, again, talking about some regressions on chin-ups and push-ups specifically. Okay. All right, let's walk through, just again, to reiterate, for those who maybe haven't seen or looked through the regressions on the platform on MYO Pivot, let's run through a couple of the chin-up regressions. I'll start with one, and then if you guys want to jump in, there's several. There's a lot that you can do with the chin-up regression. So one, probably one of the most basic ones you can do is a time static pullover. And basically what that looks like, if you're familiar with our Minnetonka facility, we have a machine that's called the isometric pullover pull down machine. And it's basically two exercises in one, but the one that you'll be able to replicate really easily at home is the static pullover, as we call it. And that's basically where your elbows are into a table or a hard surface or the countertop, and you're wanting to basically, sit either standing and leaning into the table or sitting in a chair on the edge of your seat. And you want to keep your elbows roughly parallel to or your upper arms roughly parallel to the floor. And at that position, you can even put a towel underneath your elbows just for some added comfort. But basically the idea is that you're going to be, the dynamic movement is where you're basically pulling down and back with using your lats, your mid back. And so with this movement, obviously, again, we want to think about retracting back with those shoulder blades, retracting, elbows roughly, again, 90 with the floor. And then all you're doing is that 30-second moderate effort, 30-second almost as hard as you dare, and then 30 seconds at as hard as you dare effort. So it's just a gradual application of effort, pressing down into that table. Again, we're not performing any repetitions, but you're just trying to initiate the correct muscle groups. Because in a chin-up, that's essentially a lot of those muscle groups, other than really the biceps, are being engaged in that movement. So you can kind of think about that. You can even turn your wrists inward as well and try to engage your biceps, but really just drive your elbows into that table, into that hard surface, and over 90 seconds, try to fatigue yourself as deeply as you can. Again, keeping your abdominals engaged. You can even, for an added stimulus in your abdominals, try to almost lift your pelvis up and off the chair as you're pressing down. So you're basically doing a crunch, keeping those shoulder blades retracted. And that's a very good and very, very hard exercise, actually, if you push yourself. So, and it's extremely safe because you're not performing any repetitions. Most people can put their hands on it or their arms on a table in a prayer position and just push down from there. So that's just one regression option that I find to be really helpful for training how to engage those muscles. You guys have others you'd like to share? I don't know, Mike, you had mentioned last time doing the, you had the bands connected to the door.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can just talk through it. Also placement of the bands, whether horizontal or vertical, if you want to touch base on some of those regressions. You don't necessarily have to demo it, but if you can, that'd be helpful. But
Yeah. So if you have bands or Nick has used a dog leash, a towel, a long bed sheet, something where you can hold both sides and it's at least a few feet long. Connect it to something stable. So I like to use my sliding porch door because that door's not going anywhere. I locked it. So kind of what Kevin was talking about, just making sure that, so when I retract my back, I make sure that I start with my shoulders up and then forcibly push them down so that they are all the way down. Because when we retract our back, sometimes our shoulders like to creep up a little bit. So, I mean, if I've trained you in the studio, I'm always saying shoulders down, relax your shoulders, because our shoulders like to creep up a lot. I mean, especially me, like I'm the same way. Dan is always telling me to keep my shoulders down. So one small thing to start is if you find your shoulders creeping up, forcibly push them down and then start your retraction. And like I was saying, connect something stable, connect to your band, your dog leash, your towel, bed sheet, to something, or a rope. I think Dan mentioned a rope, something connected to something stable. And then you can do like a kneeling row. So you can go on one knee, stand a few feet back, kind of however long your rope is, or dog leash or band. And you're just going to hold it out straight in front of you. And then you're going to pull it while retracting your shoulder blades, nice and slow, get a good squeeze, and then slowly come back. And then you're going to do that for the minute and a half. You're going to go nice and slow. Another one is, we didn't demonstrate it last time either, but if you set up two chairs, actually, Nick, if you want to talk about that one with like a dowel or something stable between the two chairs, I can get it set up and kind of show if you want to talk about it for a second.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, I mean, as we talk about progressions, and even I want to go a depth further of like, what is the purpose of doing a chin up in the first place? So apart from just being really effective at your body weight and being able to pull your body, up over an item, the one I always used as a kid was the thought of when I'm in the water and have to pull myself into a boat and over the top of it, was always okay. Like that's the most like practical way I'm ever going to use a chin up, assuming that I'm not climbing ropes or climbing trees or, just stuff we don't really do on a day-to-day basis. But it is such an integral part as far as it really is full body strength. And so really beyond that though, it's kind of why I think it's so effective is when you look at the muscles we're trying to activate, it's like, these are some of the most essential muscles to helping improve our posture. But not only that, it's the fact that so much of our forward or our front position muscles are deeply stimulated just by our day-to-day functioning. When we talk about being on a computer all day, texting, on the phone, so little are we ever actually engaged throughout our back. And so half the reason why the chin up and row movements are so essential is is it's not just pulling your shoulder blades back and together, but it's now this idea of you're trying to open up all these muscles that are getting hyper tense just because they're always chronically in that position. That now here's an opportunity to actually open up your body and actually get yourself a little bit more mobile. So the position me and Mike are about to show you is it's setting up two, I would say, bar stools. I don't know what Mike's going to pull out here. I think bar stools are really nice just because they're elevated off the floor a little bit more. And basically what it's going to stimulate is it's essentially a chin up, but it's just an easier variation of it. It's less range of motion, and it's just a little bit more similar or simple to execute. One I can actually show you right now is I'm going to use the table in my kitchen. So you can do this twofold. You can either do it like a time static. So I have a table, it's right about hip height, and I can essentially, I'm sorry, we're losing a little bit of light in there, and there we go. But essentially I can just pull down on the table now, and I can mock a chin up by just thinking about having my hands about shoulder width apart. And now I'm just thinking of elbows driving down into my rib cage and pulling my shoulder blades down and back. And now you're activating your lats, and basically you're activating the vertical portion of your lat as you're doing this. So the lats have two range of motion. So the chin up is going to attack this vertical range of motion versus a row motion, which is typically where you need to favor sometimes, is it's a horizontal pull or a parallel pull to the ground. So it's pulling my shoulder blades down and back. So the more rowy motion we can do and get comfortable in that range of motion, it'll make it easier over time to actually execute and actually pull up variation. So just even pulling down, you can simply as pulling down onto a door or pulling down on a table, or once again, doing that motion Kevin was talking about earlier, those are just easy movements to execute, and it gets you more stimulated for the long run of like, okay, how could I actually build into a chin up variation? So yeah, it looks like Mike got pretty much two tables set up, or two chairs set up there.
Yeah, so I don't want bar stools, but they're countertop height, so they're just a little lower. So that makes it a little bit harder. But yeah, if you have like bar stools, or even, yeah, I guess anything that has two stable surfaces on either side. I'm using a broom, which isn't the most stable thing ever. But that's the only thing I have in here. So I've tried it and I won't break it. So that's hopefully. But yeah, so Nick, do you actually want to walk or talk through it while I do it? So I don't know if they're going to be able to hear me from that far away.
Should be good. So yeah, the first thing I would say, and it depends how comfortable you are with the positioning. I'm just going to assume Mike hasn't done this all day. So he's using a supinated grip, or basically he's turning his wrist inward, like he's holding a jar of soup. Yep. So he's supinating. And why we're choosing that, it's just an easier position. So basically, I would say to stabilize, he's using a wider grip. If you have a really comfortable object, you could narrow up your grip. Yep. And the reason I say that is it's way easier to drive your elbows into your ribs if it's a more narrow grip because it's at shoulder width. But wider for this variation is just, it's going to be way easier to stabilize against that object. Now, I'm actually going to tell Mike in this position to go into a glute bridge position. Why I say that is if you're not very confident in this movement, well, now we're combining a lower body execution and we're to allow our engagement of our upper body. So basically you can see he's driving from his heels, he's getting his core engaged, he can squeeze his glutes, he can raise his hips. And now from here, I would initiate by thinking shoulder blades down and back, but think about driving your elbows now into your rib cage and that chest driving into what he's going to use as his bar. And now you can hold that position for 2 seconds and slowly go back and down. Try to keep those shoulder blades back and down throughout that variation. So that's where I just think one cue to focus on, either elbows drive into the rib cage, keep those shoulder blades back, whatever is going to really help execute the movement where you feel leg. So essentially when I was walking through this with my mom, I was telling her,
Oops, I think we lost Nick there for a second. I'm not sure what he was saying to his mom, but he'll be back here in a second. Sure. There we go. let's wait 1 second. Let's see. Sorry, 1 second. I'll get him back on here. Okay. Sorry, we lost you there, Nick. Are you back?
Yep, I died. You wanna oh, there we go. All right, we're back in.
Awesome.
Nice work there, Mike. Lost you for a second, but no, I mean, it's basically, I would pick one cue as you go through that execution, just because it's such a complex movement. I think either driving elbows into the rib cage is one of the easiest ways to think about it. Because when I think about driving low into my rib cage, naturally I have to bring my shoulder blades back and down. Versus if I just said pull your elbows into your sides, you could easily hunch over. But when I think about rib cage, you're thinking of right down, and you can feel your rib cage. That's how low you got to pull your arms down and back. And so that already carries like a down and back compulsion with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thanks for demonstrating
And
that.
so, and just to go back now picking that movement. So there's two ways. Like if you looked at how Mike initially laid out, he was just flat on the ground, and that's the more advanced variation. If you're really strong within your core, and you can see him, he's getting back in the position. Now from there, what I think of this is almost a reverse plank. So I'm thinking about still driving my heels into the ground. I think about squeezing my legs together because we want to get our adductors involved. So squeeze the legs together. Now I still think about my hips and squeezing my core because that's going to stabilize the rest of my body. And now from here, you can just drive his elbows up. And so I would call this is the next advanced variation of it, is holding that plank position as you drive your chest into that bar. Elbows drive into the chest in the bar, slow and controlled back and down.
Mm-hmm. The other variation he could do too is what you're mentioning, is just the time static version of that. And so that would basically look like just trying to maintain that finishing position, correct? Is that what you would say, is just maintaining that?
Yep.
As long as
the same thing. And for that one, what I try to emphasize mostly on a time static, especially as we go into, I was doing this with my roommates the other day, and they just had never really heard of this. That just helped. Like I could tell the second I told them this, like almost every time they went into a chest movement, that's all they could think about is drive to the chest line. And the second you just hold against that chest line, now you have, okay, I know exactly where my chest line is. I can just hold right against that. And if you're scurrying out of the position, or you need to change it, that's where you might have to go into a glute bridge position. You might have to change your variation just so you can hold that chest bar. And so I would say sometimes starting with those time static for the first couple of weeks are the best execution, because you're just holding that position. You're just getting engaged with keeping your shoulder blades together. You're getting engaged with, you're allowed to use your biceps in this motion. You're allowed to just think about, okay, I got my elbows into my ribs. I can feel my back starting to engage in. It's as simple as even sometimes going into what Becky said last week of just, can I pull my shoulder blade, just go through that comfortable range of motion naturally without any type of variation. So sometimes that's what's fun about playing with certain movement patterns. It's really just picking what's optimal, what feels comfortable, and what feels the best that I can activate when I'm trying to activate. And these various muscles, like a lot of times those are the underutilized muscles that we really want to strengthen over time.
Definitely. And even as you just mentioned, what Becky had showed last week, maybe Becky, you can show that again, but even just doing that motion and just squeezing without, just literally standing there, can be a really effective tool to train how to correctly engage and activate those muscle groups. Becky, would you be willing to demonstrate that one? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to move this back. And so if you think about that chin up, what you're doing is, Nick's talked about shoulder blades back and down and together. And so if you just start like your arms like in a W position, and then you pinch your shoulder blades together and down. I'll turn around here, shoulder blades together and down, squeeze there, and then slowly come out of that position and reach, pause, and then come back down. And you're slowly squeezing your shoulder blades together and down, and maximum squeeze here. And then that is mimicking those same movement patterns that you're using for the chin up. The other thing you could do too is if you're feeling like you're ready for it, you could actually take a chair, step on the chair, get to your pull-up bar, or like in my case, we have a really sturdy clothesline pole, and you can actually get to that position, that finishing position for the chin up, and stay there, and then slowly lower yourself down, maintaining good form, and then step back on the chair and come back up and do it again. So the chair is helping get to that positive motion, that part there, and then hold, and then slowly lower again. So that's another regression for the chin up.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for showing that, Becky. And what she was just demonstrating there, if you haven't looked at the routine C video, I believe it's routine C. They were basically, Nick is demonstrating that position with a back extension, basically prone on the ground with back extension, performing that movement. But so that's another, what Becky just demonstrated is just another great variation. Even if you're at work or you just need a little stretch, or like just to, you've been on your computer working from home, whatever it is, just to do some of those static holds in those positions can be really help with relief in the back and some of the tension that you're probably experiencing being on your computer or doing a lot of Zoom meetings like this. So so those are just some great things, even apart from the workout routine, that you can just implement just for everyday use to get the most out of this system and just provide you that additional benefit. So yeah, thanks for showing that, Becky. Any other questions or things that you guys have found helpful with understanding some of these things? No, we're getting close to being on the hour here, so we don't want to go too long. But again, keep in mind, even I've had some questions about when should I perform these routines? Okay, you have routine A, routine B, and routine C. How should that fit into my week? I would suggest starting the first half of your week, let's say Monday or Tuesday, starting with that routine A and using the regressions that's in your lesson plan for those movements that you're unable to complete with good form. And allow, if you sufficiently trigger that stimulus in your body, you deeply fatigue again, your body's going to need a couple of days to recover from that. And so first, to recover from the workout, the depletion that happened in the workout itself, and then for your body to actually make adaptations on top of that growth response. So that takes some time. It doesn't just happen overnight. So allow time for that, roughly 48 hours for most people. 72 hours would be probably more ideal, depending on, again, how deeply you're able to fatigue yourself. And then routine B would be good for the second half of your week, Thursday, Friday, or you can do vice versa. If you want to start with routine B in the first half of the week, you can kind of go either way. Or for some of you, routine B and C might be just what you want to start with in general, and eventually get to routine A as you strengthen through some of those time static movements. So ideally, if you're going to be fatiguing very deeply, no matter what routine you're using, you're going to want a couple of days for sure between workouts. And then routine C, I would say generally it's more designed to work on some of that muscle coordination and not necessarily designed to be super fatiguing, although it can be if you really push yourself to that degree. So routine C is something you could basically do whenever during the week it fits into your lifestyle routine. And again, you can also pull out some of these movements just to do during the day when you're feeling, some tension, you're feeling stiff, whatever. So that would be my general recommendation, unless you guys have some other input that you would suggest. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And again, if you utilize the one-on-one coaching calls, we can get way more specific for you individually and be able to really dial it in and get really specific on your particular needs. So even if that comes down to, okay, here's 3 exercises from routine B I want you to do, or, here's 2 from C, and we're going to blend those together to make an optimal routine for you. So really utilize those virtual calls. You can either contact us directly. Our phone number's on our website. Our website actually just went live. We're going to make an announcement about that more formally, but if you go to www.myostrong.com, that's our new website. And so there's our phone numbers right on the top. You can call or text. You can submit an email request to get those calls set up, or any other questions you may have. So definitely take advantage of that. So if our coaches have anything else to add, jump in now.
Yeah, I just have just want to reiterate something that Becky said at the beginning, and then you were talking about just now about the coaching calls. Becky was talking about how, like, you guys can use this time for whatever you would like. And I will walk around the house with you. I mean, obviously I won't be there, but virtually, and then help you find stuff to use, whether that's a door or find something strong to use for all these push-up and pull-up variations and regressions that we can do with you. We'll take the time and kind of walk around with you and find the best stuff that we can use for you and with you. So we're really here to help if you need anything. And like the first coaching call is complimentary too for you guys. So use us. We're here to help you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for saying that, Mike. And accountability is a huge thing. So even the coaching's great. Our precise instruction is second to none, I would argue. Obviously, I'm biased, but it's truly exceptional. This team of coaches are amazing, and you'll absolutely love the experience talking with them. In addition to that, accountability just in and of itself is huge. You may have heard of the Hawthorne effect, as studied in psychology, I think, but basically just the notion that when someone else is watching or taking a look at your work, you generally perform better. So definitely, if it's even just for that simple fact of like, hey, I know I'm gonna have somebody looking this over with me or holding me accountable, that's a huge piece to your success. So with that, thank you so much again for joining us today. It's truly our pleasure to serve you. We desire to build you up so that you may build others up in your life. And look forward to continuing this. So join us next week. Again, take advantage of contacting us directly with any questions or setting up a virtual call. And we really look forward to seeing our clients back in studio when we're able to do so. But until then, we'll serve you in any way that we can. So thanks again. Hope you have an awesome week. And we'll see you next time. Blessings.